Hello, welcome back. If we think about the Universal horror movies, which we should, probably more than we do, we think of extraordinarily important and influential horror films that were made between the mid-1910s up until 1956. Universal horror films, those black and white shockers that thrilled generations. And even though they're sort of quite naive and charming by today's standards, they're still incredibly important films, and we must never forget the fact that they brought classic horror characters to a cinematic audience. Universal tended to specialize in films based on those classic literary creations. We think of Bela Lugosi's version of Dracula. We think of Boris Karloff's Frankenstein monster. We think of Lon Chaney Jr. as the Wolfman. We think of Claude Rains as the Invisible Man. We think of all these classic characters that we're so familiar with in horror. They are icons of horror. But Universal also did some original stuff. Not a lot, but they did one particular character who's often not so much forgotten as not considered as much as he should be in this great body of classic cinema. I'm talking about the creature from the Black Lagoon, and today we're revisiting him on my Universal Monsters Essential Collection Blu-ray box set. Let's talk creature. Hello, welcome back to my world of stuff. My name is Paul Mount. If you're new, if you've wandered across this video because you like a bit of classic Universal horror, and let's face it, who doesn't? Then why not like and subscribe to this channel. Loads of retro stuff on here, retro TV, retro films, bit of Doctor Who, collectibles, all sorts of stuff. So just click the like and subscribe, or if you can't be bothered to do that, there is a QR code here. Just aim your camera at that code. You will be subscribed. There'll be no escape. Creature from the Black Lagoon. I haven't seen this film for absolutely years, and I thought it's probably time I did. The Creature from the Black Lagoon then is a Universal horror film that isn't held in the same esteem as Dracula, Frankenstein, and all those various offshoots and spin-offs. But it is a film which is extremely important because it calls back to King Kong. It pays forward to Jaws years later in some of its water-based sequences, and the whole design of the creature himself has influenced many people over the years, not least of all Guillermo del Toro in his film Shape of Water a few years ago, which incidentally started off as a remake of Creature from the Black Lagoon, but when that fell apart, he refashioned it into his original and quite startling vision. The Creature from the Black Lagoon has an interesting origin in that the whole story stems from a folklore, a story that was told to actor William Alland at a 1941 dinner party during the filming of Citizen Kane. At this time, William Allard was an actor and he appeared as a reporter in Citizen Kane, Orson Welles' cinematic classic. During the party, Alland was told about the myth of a strange half-fish, half-human creature that lived in the Amazon River. Alland was inspired by this and he created notes for a story called The Sea Monster, using Beauty and the Beast, which is one of the film's reference points. Over a decade later, these notes were expanded into a treatment for a film, which was rewritten as The Black Lagoon. It then developed into a script for a full feature film. And in 1953, director Jack Arnold, who had most recently directed a film called It Came From Outer Space in 3D, was hired to direct this new picture, The Creature from the Black Lagoon, which would be filmed in 3D. 3D is a cinema fad that sort of comes and goes. It had been very popular in the 1950s. By this point, it was waning in popularity, and I think that doing Creature in 3D was an attempt to sort of boost its popularity. And 3D has very much ebbed and flowed across the decades. It came back, I think, in the 70s or 80s, came back in the last few years. It was a big thing for horror films, where I think you see it at its best with knives and sticks and things looming out of the cinema screen at you. And it seems to have faded away again now. I'm not a big fan of 3D. Because of various issues regarding light filters and so on. The picture always looks a bit dimmer when you're watching it in 3D. Plus, of course, I have the faff of putting 3D glasses on top of my own specs, so it never really works for me. Plus, as a gimmick, I just don't see the point in it because films tend to have to be structured so they make use of 3D. So you do have things jumping out of the camera and appearing in front of you. And I think it compromises the story a bit when you know that the writers and director has to think in terms of how can you make the 3D work. The film starts off with an expedition to the Amazon uncovering a fossilized skeletal hand with webbed fingers, which apparently originated in the Devonian geological period, and it suggests a link between land animals and sea creatures. This is brought to the attention of a group of scientists, and they set off on an expedition into the Amazon aboard a rusty old tug ship called the Rita to try and find more evidence of this life form. The group includes ichthyologist David Reed, played by Richard Carlson, his boss, Dr. Mark Williams, played by Richard Denning, David's girlfriend and colleague, Kay Lawrence, played by Julie Adams, and scientist Dr. Edward Thompson, played by Whit Bissell, who, a decade or so later, would go on to appear in Irwin Allen's
The Time Tunnel.
That's right. They're travelling aboard the tramp steamer, which is piloted by Lucas, but something is watching them from the depths. Something that's fascinated by these human intruders into its domain, even as it terrorises them. Can the expedition escape from the lagoon, despite all the creature's efforts to stop them? That's basically the story of the creature from the Black Lagoon. What I like about the film, well, there's many things I like about it. First of all, it's 79 minutes. That's always a good thing. These films of this era, we didn't have these 2-hour blockbusters then. We didn't have these things that went on and on. 79 minutes, gets in, gets on with it, and it actually feels longer because there's a lot going on. There's a lot of incident, a lot of tension, a lot of creepy stuff, a lot of beautiful underwater photography. It feels like it packs a lot into it, 79 minutes, and it really does. It's a very good script, great performances from the cast, and the USP of the film is the creature itself, an astonishing creation for its time. Now we're conscious watching it that this is a man in a costume, but what a costume. The original version of the costume was a slightly slicker version than the one we see on screen, less obviously fishy. It's smoother. It has less accentuated piscine features, less fins, less gills and so on. It's much more of a wetsuit with some vaguely fish-like bits attached to it. The ultimate costume which is used is incredibly impressive for the time it was made. It was actually designed by Disney animator Millicent Patrick, although makeup artist Bud Westmore sort of downplayed her involvement, and he tends to get the credit for the costume. It was a joint enterprise, I suppose, but it was Millicent Patrick who actually really created the definitive look of this gill-man creature. The head is particularly worthy of note because it's not just like a pull-on mask or something rubber that was stuck over an actor's head, because it has some basic prosthetic movement to it. There are gills at the side of it, and in a couple of scenes you can see these gills moving as if it's a fish out of water, and that was all done not by electronics as it would be today, but by pumps just pumping air into the ears. You only see it in one or two scenes, but it's very effective. Also effective is the way that the gillman performers, when they're out of the sea, are opening and closing their mouths like fish, and when it's in the water, it is very, very convincing. In fact, I go as far to say it's totally convincing. You do forget that it is a performer in a costume because it looks so good. It's such a beautifully put together costume. It does help you suspend your disbelief. You believe the illusion that's in front of you, that this is an underwater creature that has lived in the Amazon alone and isolated and part of a race of creatures perhaps. The film doesn't really go into much detail about the potential history of this thing. Clearly it's part of a race that's died out. It may be the last survivor. We never go into that sort of detail in the story because the story is about finding this creature and what it does to protect itself. And it's a sympathetic creature in a way because it's minding its own business, doing its own thing. But when humans step into its territory, it lashes out and it kills quite savagely because it sees these human intruders as a threat. The creature itself is played by two different performers. Ben Chapman played Gillman for the majority of scenes that were shot at Universal City in California, including scenes filmed at Park Lake, which is this area of the Universal backlot. I think it is still there. Basically a water area in the middle of Universal Studios. And Rico Browning played the Gillman in sequences that were filmed at Wakulla Springs in Florida. These are the sequences that required all the underwater stuff, and these scenes are incredible. When you think this was made in 1954, the underwater photography is genuinely stunning and hugely effective when you see this creature just swimming great speeds through the water, watching the humans above, hiding in the reeds, looking out. One particularly quite disturbing sequence in a way is when Kay, played by Julia Adams, goes for a swim, and she's swimming back and forth through the water in the Amazon, and Gilman is sort of following her. He's underneath her. He's following her every move. And it's very, very effective. And this is where the film prefigures Jaws in 1975, because we see the character treading water and swimming about. And we know that the creature is tailing her from below, watching her and fascinated by her. A King Kong thing in a way, that he is attracted to this unusual looking creature. But of course, there are elements of Jaws here, because we have a woman, a vulnerable woman in the water, and something in the water is watching her and following her. Powerful scenes that I think must have been on Steven Spielberg's mind when he did Jaws, because they're so fundamental to the idea of being in the water and something unknowable and unknown is following you and hunting you. And the interesting thing is that the creature, although it is quite savage in some ways, it attacks people, but it only attacks people when it is under threat. It's captured at one point and it breaks free from this netting that it's in and swims away. Then it's captured again, brought aboard the Rita. It escapes and attacks people. It is defending itself, it's protecting itself, it's trying to get away. But it is fascinated by these people who've come into its domain, and it will protect itself and it will protect its territory. And whilst it does some terrible things, it mutilates somebody, strangles people, but we know why it's doing it, because it's being violated by people from another civilization that it doesn't understand. It's very violent towards the male characters because they're violent towards it. And it finds Kay attractive because she's not like that. She isn't waving guns and firing guns and trying to poison it. She is fascinated by it and she's watching it, and she is sympathetic towards it when they bring it aboard the ship. The film rushes towards its conclusion in a King Kong fashion when the creature captures Kay from the ship and takes her to a nearby cave. I've no idea what he planned to do with her there. We better not think about that. But she is rescued by the remaining members of the expedition and the creature is shot. And the last we see of it, it appears to be mortally injured and is floating away to presumably its death at the bottom of the river. It's such a strong film. It's such an enjoyable film. It's unpretentious, but it's very clever. As I said, it's a very good script, a good characterization. And you can do good characterization in a 79-minute film. You had a bit of a love triangle. You have Dr. David Reed, Richard Carlson's character. He's in a relationship with Kay, but Richard Dennings, Mark Williams, he's jealous because he quite fancies her as well. It did something that a lot of these films did at this time. You had an older male romantic lead. I mean, Richard Carlson was in his 40s when this was made, and Kay Lawrence wasn't. She was in her late 20s. But you see this in a lot of these sorts of horror science fiction films of that time. They would have a more mature male character, almost sort of a protective character who would look after this young, fragile, willowy, vulnerable woman. A cliche today, and of course it wouldn't happen today, but it's interesting to see that this is something that these films did. But it's quite charming to see something like that, and it has quite a refreshing naivety to it. It's full of action, it's full of life. It's in black and white, of course, it's not a colour film, but it's really good. And through it all, Gilman is just this iconic creation which spawned a massive raft of merchandise after the film came out. Over the years, there's been all sorts of stuff, comic books and books and graphic novels, pinball machines, little action figures. I might try and track one of them down myself, actually. And 2 sequel films. There was a sequel, The Revenge of the Creature, which came out a year later, again directed by Jack Arnold, again in 3D. And the following year, the trilogy, as it turned out to be, came to an end with The Creature Walks Among Us. And that, incidentally, was also the last classic Universal horror film. It brought that era to an end as well. I haven't revisited those 2 films, but I will, because again, they're quite short and punchy. I think it's The Creature from the Black Lagoon itself, which is the genuinely iconic film here. It's a fantastic film, and it has a simplicity about it and a straightforward line of storytelling that is so refreshing. Absolutely highly recommended if you've never seen it. It's available on this Monsters Collection, a Blu-ray set, which I think is still available. It may well be available on separate DVD Blu-ray, and it's also available on Amazon, but you've got to cough up for it there. Creature from the Black Lagoon, a great film, very underrated in the Universal horror films because people tend to think of all those other characters first. But this was an original one, an original story, original idea, And at the time, people had never seen something quite like this, something so inhuman. It's a great film, but it has so much depth to it. It isn't just a monster film. It is a story that speaks about humanity and its fear of the unknown and the unlike. And it's just a great 79 minutes of entertainment. So I highly recommend you watch it if you've never seen it. I'm sure most of you have. I'm going to give Creature from the Black Lagoon a great big 9 out of 10. A great film, really entertaining. Right, thank you for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Press there, click that. I'll see you soon. Until I do, keep taking the stuff.